So this video is a podcast interview with Randy Rush, who won $50 million in the lottery.
Are you listening?
So this is a podcast interview with Randy Rush, who won $50 million in the Lotto Max in Canada. And I was super excited to sit down with him. My name's Timothy Schultz. I'm actually also a lottery winner. In 1999, I won the Powerball. It's one of the craziest things that's ever happened to me before going back to college to study film and journalism and broadcast news. And I'm now combining my experience with these things with my desire to meet and interview other people that I find fascinating on this channel, including other lottery winners. So if you are new to my channel, do consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon if you want to be notified when more of these interviews come out. But this video is a podcast interview with Randy Rush, who won $50 million in the Lotto Max in Canada. And his story is extremely fascinating for a number of reasons. He's actually the author of a new book, 13 Billion to 1, Winning the 50 Million Lottery Has Its Price. And his insights were very fascinating. We got to talk about not only what it was like to win 50 million, but also how it changed his life. We even got to talking about money and happiness, and just a number of subjects where I found his insights extremely fascinating. So without further ado, let's get to it now. Here is my podcast interview with lottery winner Randy Rush, who won a 50 million jackpot in Lotto Max. So I am here with 50 million Lotto winner Randy Rush. He has a new book titled 13 Billion to 1, a memoir. Winning the 50 million lottery has its price. Randy, how are you today?
I'm very good, thank you, sir. I just wanted to close the window there. I got traffic outside, so I didn't want to interfere with your quality of recording there. But I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Good. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. These are crazy times right now for
Likewise, yes.
Yeah. So you won $50 million in 2015.
Yes.
On Lotto Max.
Yes.
Congratulations. That is
sure. Thank you.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So what did that feel like?
Oh my gosh, it's very existential in nature. You know, it's very hard to describe. The only way you could really describe it is like that space shuttle taking off. You know, and the endorphins that are running through your head, you actually could die of a heart attack. The experience is so intense. Wow. I actually did develop a sleeping disorder for about 2.5 years. It took about 2 years to come down.
Really?
Yeah. I've been back to normal for about, at least 2.5 years now, you know, so, yeah. But yeah, it's a pretty intense experience.
Yeah. How did you find out that you won?
Well, it's detailed in my book that's coming out, 13 Billion to 1. But it was a cold winter day in northern Alberta, and I have this very large Maine Coon cat. He's about 27 pounds, and I ran him out of food, and it wasn't one of those good meows, right? You know, and so I was on the way out, and I thought, I should check my numbers, you know, and had a whole stack of tickets, probably about 30 of them, maybe 40, and it was the very last ticket I checked.
Oh wow!
It was right at the bottom of the stack.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
And I read that it was a quick pick.
Yeah, but the story on how I even played the lottery is it's detailed in the book because I don't gamble. I never have. I've been to Vegas a number of times in my life, and I never put $1 in any of those machines or at those tables or anything. In fact, I wouldn't even know how to operate them. I'd have to get an app or something to show me how to do it, you know, but never have. And so it's it's a bit of a convoluted story. I actually had to be talked into playing the lottery by a friend of mine who just passed away about a year and a half ago.
Why didn't you play? Did you think that you didn't have a chance, or?
No, because and I think the American government looks at lottery revenue the same way as our government does. They classify it as a voluntary tax. And why would you volunteer to pay more tax?
Yeah.
That was been my whole thinking, and I was at my friend Daryl's house. He passed away a year and a half ago, but and the story is very documented. It's not fabricated at all. But we were watching football one day, and I had these numbers flash in my head, and we were just drinking beer. So, but he said, those look like good lottery numbers. He told me to write them down, and I said, well, I don't play the lottery, man. I said, it's just a, voluntary tax, right? And he said, yeah, but you don't win if you don't play. And I thought, well, that's true, And he said, wouldn't it just burn you, man? Like if those numbers came in one day and you didn't play them. And the only reason I gave those numbers any credibility is about 15 years prior, I was playing cribbage with my grandmother. And I was holding 6, 7, 8, 8. And anyone who plays crib knows what I'm talking about. And, you cut the deck and whoever's crib it is. And I needed a 7 to complete the 24-point run. And I thought it was my crib. And she said, get your hands off my crib, And when she touched my hand, the 7 of hearts flashed in my head. And the 7 of hearts turned over. So, and it was the same numbers I saw in my head later on. So that's the only reason why I gave it any credibility, And then I was playing those numbers pretty regularly, like fanatically actually, and I was only spending $20 a week. But the last 3 years, it was really building up. I could feel this energy coming, and even about 6 months before, it was very, very, very intense. And I just felt it. I even streamlined some personal relationships. I got out of a relationship with a gal I was seeing for a year, and because I knew it wouldn't be good for her or her kids. And then when it did happen, I didn't think it would be quite as big as it was. I thought it'd be maybe 2 or 3 if I was lucky, 5 if I was lucky, but I wasn't expecting 50. And when you do win, you go before a panel and a commission, and you tell your story. They verify your story. They check your ticket. And they said, well, what's your story, Randy? And I started talking. I said, this might sound like complete fabrication. And they said, stop. We hear this all the time. I said, really? They said, no. We hear your story all the time. And I thought, well, okay, that's kind of interesting, So it gave some credibility to what I was thinking. And, and my very close circle of friends, I was telling them, I said, I'm going to win. Just about 4 or 5 people, and I said, this is going to happen, oh, that's nice. Good for you, Randy, and, and so, when it did happen, it was very surreal, so to speak,
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's really fascinating. I've interviewed a couple lottery winners that believe they have won because of the law of attraction, and also and other people that have had experiences which led them to believe that something big was going to happen before it happened.
Interesting.
And for myself, a few months prior to winning, I had a very vivid dream that led me to believe that it was going to happen. So I was playing with the thought that I was going to win. And I'm not claiming that it was caused by the law of attraction or that I was tapping into something, but it's a really interesting coincidence. I mean, it's really just very fascinating to me. So I do ask every other lottery winner I interview about this type of thing. So what are your thoughts about your win? Do you think that it was possibly the law of attraction, or do you think it was you were just tapping into something that was going to happen, or do you think it was mere coincidence, or what are your thoughts?
That's a good question, and I kind of have some reservations about going that deep because I'm more concerned about the domino effect that might happen, and and where I'm going with that is like, you can't treat the creator as a formula or a sort of a computer, and, do this or do that. But I had this vision in my mind for a long time. I'm very economical in nature, and I do a lot of overseas work, and I also supported a lot of overseas work in Africa. And I had this vision in my mind and my spirit for many years about having a refuge house or homes for, humanitarian aid workers, because a lot of times those people come back and there's shells of people, and a lot of times their organizations forget about them, their countries forget about them, or they get caught up in some foreign politics where they can't get out of the country. Sometimes they barely make it out with the clothes on their back. And I started talking to some very serious people, and I said, does something like this exist? And they said, no. And I said, and I was making very good money before I came into my money. I was making about $250 a year, and single guy and no kids. And so I was doing very well for a man my age. And I said, listen, I just know when you're open, the Lord provides. And so it kind of did happen. So I'm setting up my foundation. I'm doing the legal work for it. I got the lawyers in place, and it's kind of like the story of Alfred Nobel.
I do not.
No, he's credited with inventing dynamite.
Oh,
and he was a pacifist in nature, and then he was so disturbed that his invention was used for war and destruction. And he became a ridiculously wealthy man, like Bill Gates, Warren Buffett wealthy. But this is like 150 years ago, when they didn't have half the taxes we got today, right? Right. And so he set up a foundation that the interest that spins off his money goes to people who promote peace and writing through math. And we know it today as the Nobel Peace Prize. So that interest that's spinning off is generating that to this day. And, who knows what that fund is really worth today, right? So I really had that in my mind, and really it was getting stronger and stronger, and this is what I wanted to do. And so I just remember saying to these, one was a president of a pretty serious university in Alberta. And I said, I just know if you're open, just completely open, the Lord will provide. And he did, so but I don't really like to, because there's a lot of religious movements out there, that, God is just a formula or just a, slot machine, and, give some money and you get blessed. That's not really what the heart and mind of what we're taught in the New Testament and the Old Testament too, by the way. And I don't really like to, I usually don't really talk too much publicly on it, but that was my position. That was my thinking, whether you agree with it or not. But, I guess the proof is in the pudding at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So, that vision is really starting to fulfill. And, and I got a lot of stories where, where a lot of people have been really healed and really rested and involved with some really good conservative people. And, I got a few boutique homes that overlook water and a river, and they're very peaceful settings. So those doors are opening up. And, the interest that spins off the bulk of the money will support those projects long after I'm gone, right? So, but
and what are you doing overseas with some of these, with your humanitarian efforts? Because I know you're heavily involved in that.
Yeah, not so much these days because of COVID, right? I actually should be in Africa next month. There's I bought some land for a wonderful organization, and they built a school. And until you go to Africa and you really see it firsthand, we see all the trailers on TV and stuff like that. But I was just so affected by their willingness to learn. And it's really mind-boggling. Some of these kids walk 5 miles a day just to go to school.
Wow.
And it's and we don't even teach our kids in Canada how to cursory write anymore. It's all, and, it is what it is, but, it's a real shift in thinking. And then when you come back from some of these places, you realize the term first world problems, you know, and you really see how entitled we are in our politics and our political thinking and just our attitudes and expectations. And, you know, when you look at our population in North America, I mean, we're, gee, gosh, I don't think we're even 5%, you know, but we have the highest standard of living. And, you know, you really see for such a small percentage of people, and Europe too, you know, they got a pretty high standard of living there too, but not like Canada or the United States, right? You know, it's so you really, that really drives that home, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. In the United States, as you probably know, if you win a major prize, you're heavily taxed. You know, it's a hefty tax, and it's still, you know, incredible to win.
Right.
But how was that for you?
It was very surreal, you know. Like, you know, how the analogy I use is I was driving a $250,000 a year yacht, right? And then you get handed a $50 million yacht. And, you know, the difference in ships, I mean, you need a crew, you need people, you need maintenance guys, right? And I think I think what saved me is I always had a ceiling on everything, you know, and I realized very quickly that I can't steer a ship like that unless I have a good crew. And then that was a little bit of a process. You know, I cycled through some people fairly quickly, but at the end of the day, you know, you get the best lawyers, the best accountants. And I think that's where a lot of lottery winners get in trouble. It's like, oh, you know, I can do this, and no, don't worry, you don't. No, those are the guys who go broke. And, you know, statistics back that up. So, you know, a friend of mine I went to school with, he started his leasing company 20 years ago. And I think last year his company did 1.2 billion in business.
Wow.
And so we got reconnected, and, you know, he said he started it from scratch. This guy is just beyond category and intelligence level, you know. And so he said, I wasn't sure if I could work with you, Randy, you know, and but he said, you get the thinking. He goes, my job with you is going to be very easy. You get the thinking, you know, you just need a little bit of steering here and there. So it was very validating for, you know, for me. And along that way, I've met some incredibly amazing people, you know. You know, it's just, I've had some really negative experiences too. But that kind of goes with the territory. You know, if you talk to any movie star or music star or anyone who's, you know, athlete, they always go through a period where they get taken. It's part of life, you know. And the secret is not to repeat those mistakes. You know, you learn from those mistakes, and always have a ceiling on any venture. Just don't open the barn door. And family, you know, I had some serious family issues too, especially with my mother. It got, you know, to the point where we had to part company. And then, you know, some siblings too. And, but otherwise, you know, you have to have, you got to be pretty regimented in your thinking. And I'm fortunate I didn't come from a large family with 14, you know, brothers and sisters, a million cousins, right? You know? And, but I had a lot of friends, and what I did was I took $1 million off the top and said, listen, guys, you know, I had a whole list of names, and, I said, this is a hand up, not a handout. And it's a one-time gift. And, you know, how do you sleep at night when you got all this money in the bank and you know your friends are struggling? You know, and some of those people, they did well, and some of those people, they repeated their cycles. And, you know, I learned a lot about giving and what giving is, and the difference between giving and enabling. There's a huge difference. And then through that process, I quickly learned why some of my friends were in the positions they were, you know, and it's not really how much money you make, it's how much you keep at the end of the day, isn't it?
Yeah. Those are some really good points. I had to learn some really hard lessons. When I won, initially I helped people, you know, people that I cared about, but then people would keep coming back, and I learned that you had to put a line in the sand, or else people just keep coming back. And people that had financial issues prior, they still had the financial issues because that's just how they spend their money.
That's right.
So it was more difficult with the personal relationships, and some of them have been ruined over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know about you, but the people that I actually knew in real life that it was more difficult to tell them no, and to learn how to tell them no, and to learn that, you're not a bank, but also at the same time, if you have the ability and desire to help people and do positive things, that's wonderful too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the thinking, and it was I lost some very good friendships. One was 43 years. I found out a very close friend of mine had a gambling problem, and I paid off his debts once, and then 8 months later he was bankrupt again. I thought, okay, there's more at play, right? And here's how I dumbed it down, Tim. Is money makes you a bigger person of who you are. So if you're a very giving person, you're going to be a bigger giving person. If you're, cretinous in nature, you're gonna be bigger, aren't you? Right. And and also too, if there's cracks in someone's personality, and I use the analogy of a dam, the more water you got behind the dam, the more those cracks are magnified, and eventually the dam will burst. And I saw that in a number of relationships, and I made one mistake I did make, is that you assume that all your friends think like you. And that was so further from the truth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And are you familiar with sudden wealth syndrome?
No, please explain that.
So I, shortly after winning the lottery, way back in the day, I heard about this term. It's a psychological term that has to do with, specifically, mostly to lottery winners, and I believe that I was afflicted by it, if you want to use that term, afflicted, but
sure.
It's a psychological thing where if you suddenly come across wealth that you didn't have before, it can make you feel very alone and very isolated, and even some guilt for having won, because depending on how much you win, you probably can't help everyone in the world. There's billions of people, but you can still do really positive things. But I myself felt like I was sort of afflicted by this, so I do ask other lottery winners about.
Yeah,
that's
interesting.
Any of those types of things, or no?
Actually, yeah, because in my book I talk about my life prior, and I was raised on welfare. I didn't grow up in privilege, and even how I bought my first house, I tell people, and they go, "You're kidding me," and I said, "Nope." So I was very driven. I was a very driven person, and when I worked for everything, like everything I had in my life, I worked, and I got the paychecks to prove it. 80 hours overtime for 2-week pay period. I was a very driven guy, and then I got to a certain success level, and then you get all this money, and I'm a car fanatic, always have been, always will be. It's my wheelhouse, and if you want to talk cars, we can talk all day long. But at the same time, I've owned a number of vehicles, and some of them I made some really tremendous money on, and I sell them, and the profits I make I put towards my projects in Africa, right? So, but I'm going somewhere with that. When I bought my first Ferrari, I bought a 458 Spider, and it was 350,000 Canadian, and I thought, my gosh, I paid 108,000 for my first house. I had a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I no longer have that car. It was great. It was fun, and sold it. And I broke even on that car. Kind of. I lost a few thousand. But, cheaper than leasing and renting, right? So, but I had a hard time because I didn't work for this, and I always had a hard time asking people for help. Like if I phoned you for help, I really needed your help, right? And my friends knew that. Those phone calls didn't come through very often, and but that was the hard. It kind of fits into what you're talking about there. I had a really, even to have a maid come in and do my floors. That was difficult for me to get my head around, and my laundry, I still do my own laundry, always will,
Yeah.
and I lived a very Spartan lifestyle, but at the same time, I traveled well. I'm comfortable sleeping on a sack of rice or a pellet of rice in Africa, which I have napped on a number of times. I can sleep in a car, and I'm fine in a 5-star hotel too. So I think the trick is, Tim, is never forget where you came from, and that keeps you grounded, doesn't it? And and I think that gives you a sense of reality, and it's wealthier men than us have gone broke, haven't they? So you have to keep that in mind too, and you got to be a good steward of your funds, and if everything's paid for, the analogy I use is like a bathtub of water, and you're a sponge. The sponge can only absorb so much, and so those are things that sort of keep me down to earth and real. And you realize that it's just numbers at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, that seems very, very smart and down to earth. Yeah, when you win the lottery, it's one of the most rare things that can possibly happen to a person. You have a better chance of being crushed by a meteorite than that of winning the lottery. But somebody somewhere always eventually wins. And, what do you think about, at least in the United States, there's no support for most lottery winners. I know there are in other places, some places, and even the publishing clearinghouse, if you win that, they give you a financial advisor and they help you if you win. But what are your thoughts on both the psychological as well as the financial aspect of it? Do they have that in Canada, or?
No, not that I'm aware of. And I've thought about approaching the Lottery Commission and saying, hey, guys want to develop a guidebook or a guidance schedule, and I think there could be some wisdom in that, because the kind of money we're talking about, Tim, is it can be a blessing, it can be a curse, it can destroy you, and especially if you have some vices on the go. And, it can really, really mess up some people. There was a story where up to a few years ago, I was the largest winner in Canada. I think one guy just won $60 or $70 million about a few months ago, a 21-year-old kid in Toronto or Ontario. And I contacted my friends at the CBC, and I said, listen, just if you can reach out to this guy, I'd love to talk with him. And look, I'm not interested in any money. I really feel for this kid, man. He's either set for life or he's ruined for life, And, once you come into that kind of money and you don't have it anymore, well, the psychological effect of that is quite enormous. And, I think the thing is, I don't want to be that guy in the restaurant. That guy over there, he blew all his money. I'm not going to be one of those guys. Yeah. And so and I'm not. And with some good advice and good people and really exceptional people, tier 1 people. It's that will maintain that. I call it long-term greedy. Just a little bit. Just stay conservative. And you'll get there eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds like really smart. I do want to ask you about your book, 13
Sure,
Billion
please.
to 1. So, first of all, when is the book out? When is it going to be released?
We're doing a limited edition release June 24th, and then we're looking at a few other options. There's been a huge amount of interest from some people in Hollywood and some people, outside of Hollywood. And so we'll see, it's where it'll go. If these conversations don't go anywhere, that's fine. But just to have them is really validating and exciting too, at the same time. But, we'll see where it goes at the end of the day. Just the people I've met along the way, through this whole story. And what I tell people is what I really wanted to drive home in the book is no matter how dire your situations are, there's always hope, I got, when it did happen, like I was talking about streamlining my relationships, Only about 5 people had my phone number, and one of them was a very, very good friend of mine who was a little older. And that was the crack in the wall. That was sort of the Judas in the camp, so to speak. And, that book is detailed in Bloodsuckers, and it's available on Amazon by Randy Rush. And I didn't know that my friend Dave was a serial con man, and his son and his family were serial con hunters. And so as my story was unfolding with him, we started peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak. And we documented about 200 people that were taken over a 20-year period, about 25 million in cash, cars, and assets.
Wow.
And, I was able to get back about 70 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar, which was truly amazing. But I think what saved me is my investment in that was an asset-based investment. And so I got those assets back. I did lose some money in the process, but I have made it up eventually. But then, I started to see what white-collar crime really was. I can steal your car and go to jail, but I can sell you some Class B shares in a company and just, leave Dodge, and there's not a thing you can do except civil action. And that's the problem in the United States too. And that's if you don't have the funds to do it, and just to get in front of a judge is $10,000, $20,000. A lot of people don't have that kind of money hanging around.
Right. And
that's why they target those people. It's usually a family friend or someone who knows someone, and they don't know how. I vetted this project 5 Ways of Friday too, and it was real and legitimate. But the guy at the center of it was embezzling money, and we shut it down after 4 months, and he embezzled about 1.5 million US before we, the guillotine came down. And that story is very documented in Bloodsuckers and in 13 billion to 1.
Wow. So he was formerly, obviously you trusted him.
Oh, the goodwill was massive. It was huge. And just the sweetest people you ever met,
So how did you find out that he was scamming you?
There's always that 2%, I sat down with his parents and I said, listen, is Jeremy okay? Is there some things I should know? And they put their arms around me and looked me square in the eye and said, oh, he's the most honest man there is in the world and blah, blah, blah. You don't have to worry about this. And I thought, okay. And they said, we know our son's a little different, but, and there is a presence of this guy. Like he's very charismatic in nature, and he's really good at what he does. We're coming down to the launch date, and it just, the goodwill was running out. And I said, let's look at the numbers here, and then the excuses and this and that. And I thought, no, this doesn't smell right. And we shut it down. We got a receiver involved, and sure enough, I was right. So there was 14 counts of fraud, mortgage fraud, insurance fraud, and it just went on and on. But that was all civil. And then he took off back to Canada. So the Americans said, well, he's a Canadian. Let the Canadians worry about it. We just uncovered a scam. This is how good the guy is, where allegedly, and not allegedly, but we got some pretty good documentation to back up this statement, where he had an N95 mask scam, and it took place in England, spread over 5 countries, and the deal was approved and was going to be handed to Boris Johnson himself personally with recommendations to proceed. But the deal was worth 800 million British pounds.
Wow.
1.3 billion Canadian. And we got a hold of the right people at the right time, and it spread over 5 countries, and still, so after I heard that, I thought, what, this is out of my league. I've done what I've done, and I wrote a book, and so I've moved on, I really have. And, so hopefully, it fell on the right ears somewhere. And, but the white collar crime, the way to look at it is the legal system is a big wall, and there's cracks in the wall, and some people know how to live in the cracks, don't they? And they really do. And he's got it really dialed in. This whole family's got it dialed in. So, it is what it is, and I've moved on, and life goes on, man. You know.
Yeah. No, it does. Were they held accountable?
Yes, it's a very long, legal, convoluted story, and it's in the books, right?
Okay.
You know, but yeah, they were civilly, but criminally, to make that jump over to that side, it's huge.
Yeah, and so you now are heavily involved in fighting white collar crime.
Yeah,
Is this what inspired that, and what exactly
Yeah.
are you doing to
Yeah.
fight white collar crime
Yeah,
now?
so my there's stages of being conned by white collar crime people, and I was mad and I was angry and said some things I shouldn't have, right? But then you realize how to deal with it and process it, and don't let it ruin your life, But one story where I got really evangelical about it is when we were doing the research for Bloodsuckers. There was an immigrant couple that came to Canada working 2 jobs each, so they're working 4 jobs, and they saved up $7,000, and Jeremy Crawford came along and scammed them and left them homeless.
Oh, wow.
And then there was another story. He had a lease-to-own scam and for housing, and then there was another young married couple that was had a 3-month-old baby, and they were living in their van, And I thought, I got the money to recover from this. And I thought, you know what? There was just too much stories that were similar, and the documentation was so consistent that, that I thought, we got to shed some light on this.
Yeah.
And I think we shed some pretty good light on it. There's been 6 articles in the CBC. He even scammed his own lawyers in my law case, and he stiffed him for $150,000 US. And how do you do that? You don't get to the next level unless your account's up to date, right? Yeah. So, but he's that good, this guy. He really is.
That's awful. Well, I'm sorry that happened to you.
It is what it is, man. Yeah.
It sounds like it's been a life lesson, and creating these other things that are very positive that you're doing.
Exactly.
So I commend you for that. Is there anything else that you wanted to say today that I don't know enough to ask?
There's a lot we could say, but I think don't bank on winning the lottery, even if you think you're going to. Keep your don't spend money you don't have. Just stick to your plan. Because it may be 5 years, maybe 20 years or 30 years. If you're in that landscape or that wheelhouse, so to speak, right? And if you, like I say, I felt that energy coming, it really did. And but I wasn't spending money I didn't have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I always tell people: you never spend more than you can afford to lose.
This is true.
What is your opinion on money and happiness? Because it's just something I'm exploring on this channel, and there's one
interesting,
yeah, and it's. Everyone has an opinion about it, but there's one. I've read some studies out there, and one of them showed that once you earn, I believe it was around $100,000. I could be off, but once you earn above a certain amount per year, then you're not going to be. It was arguing you're not going to be significantly happier than the person that's making tons more. So if you have, a few million, and then you have a few billion, the billionaire and the millionaire are probably not, their level of happiness is not going to drastically change just because of the money. That's what the study argued. But there's another study that argued that actually giving money to people, whether you have millions or billions or hundreds of thousands, if you're giving money to people, then that is more apt to stimulate happiness. This is after you don't have the stresses of bills or a mortgage or debts or that sort of thing. So this is. But what's your opinion on that?
That's a good question, and I think you have to define what happiness and money is. Mm-hmm. And happiness is you got to be content as a person first, and money does it. The old saying, it can't buy you happiness, but I kind of disagree with it, because it buys you a lot of time to free up your time, To me, money buys you time. And when you look at the really, really wealthy people, they don't smoke, they don't drink, they don't gamble, they don't really have any vices. And I can never really figure out what drives these guys, right? They got more money than they can spend in 1,000 lifetimes. And it wasn't until I reconnected with some people I went to school with who've been very successful. And I was at their penthouse apartment about 10 years ago, and when I left there, I was almost drunk, and we hadn't had anything to drink. And I thought, now I get it. It's that adrenaline rush of money, that intoxicating effect of money. That's what drives the Bill Gates and the Warren Buffetts and these really high, the Richard Bransons of the world. Also too, these guys are wired a really different way. Sometimes they seek their teeth into a project and they won't sleep for 2-3 days. And also too, how they look at money is completely different how me and you would look at money. It's a whole different angle on things. But happiness is and are those men happy? Well, I don't know, but they're not pursuing happiness. They're pursuing that adrenaline, that next $100 million deal, the next $1 billion deal. That's what really drives those guys. And they're very disciplined in nature. They're up at 4 a.m., they exercise, see what the markets did. They're health food fanatics.
Wow.
And they exercise and they don't drink, they don't smoke, they don't do drugs, men fall for three reasons, and women too. It's money, power, and women. And if a female, it's men, money, and power, right? And all three of those vices are very intoxicating in nature. Power is very intoxicating. It's that's what drives these people. And it's the famous quote from J.D. Rockefeller. He was considered the world's first billionaire back in the 1920s, and he was asked a very famous question. He said, how much money do you need, J.D.? He said, just a little more.
Yeah.
And with those guys, whether it's power or money, it's just a little more, and that's what drives these guys. President Trump, he was 70 years old. $1 billion worth billions of dollars. The guy wasn't done yet, but he said that Oval Office is coming up. I'm going to apply for that job.
Yeah.
What drives a person like that? It's a quest for power.
Right.
So you gotta have some borders around it, or you can really go in some different directions quite quickly. And but as for money and happiness, I think you got to be happy before you have money. And if you're not, it's not going to make you any more happy. But for me, my whole thing is when I wake up in the morning, am I clean? And yeah, I am. And that's my happiness. And I was like that before I came into my money too. And so I think if you keep that thinking, and you're disciplined to the point where you can't get led off any rabbit trails, down these intoxicating vices avenues, then I think you can, definitely. And one thing I will say, I don't hear really wealthy people saying that money doesn't buy you happiness. I've yet to hear one billionaire say that. So and like I said earlier, whether you got 50,000 or 50 million, you still got the same first world problems. You still wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. You still got to pay bills, feed your cat. And I had to deal with a flat tire the other day. First world problems. It's your life. In some respects, doesn't change. But, I think what really drives some of the things that we're talking about, I think what you have to really, really focus on is that health is wealth. And, you can be the wealthiest person in the world, but if you don't have your health, man, you got nothing.
Yeah. No, that seems very, very wise. I completely agree with you. So I obviously haven't read your book yet. I'm very, 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 very excited to read it. And so for the viewers out there, what can they expect? Is there anything that we haven't talked about about the book that I don't know because I haven't read it that you wanted to say today?
Sure. I just when we started to outline this project, I didn't want it to be a negative story, and I wanted it to really give people hope. And not just about being taken by money, but my life story is one of really of perseverance. And that's the message I really wanted to convey. Like, no matter how dark your situation is. I mean, when I was 26, I was almost homeless, and I've never forgotten that experience. And that experience is detailed in the book. And and then to look at yourself 26 years later, and putting my lottery win aside, I was very successful and as a senior sales rep for a large international company. And if you got drive and you got a goal and just always have hope, surround yourself with people who think that way too. And, it's a very important that you find your tribe, so to speak. And sometimes that's a process in itself, but at the same time, no, I really wanted to really convey, hope to people and just there's always light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it sounds very, very positive, and
Thank you.
I personally can't wait to
thanks,
read
man.
it. So,
yeah.
Congratulations again on
Thank you.
on the win and also the book. Once again, it's titled 13 Billion to 1, a memoir. Winning the 50 million lottery has its price. So where can people find it?
They can find it on a number of different platforms. Amazon's one, Barnes and Noble's another one. It's if you Google 13 billion to 1 by Randy Rush, it's out there. Also, too, just I want to add the lady who wrote the book is a lady named Ingrid Ricks. I dedicated it to her. And during this whole project, it was about 3 years in the making, she was losing her eyesight, and you would have never known it. And so working with this human being is, it's really given me a new lease on life, and again, giving hope, and she's a really remarkable human being. And again, first world problems, right? So, but to me, that was very inspirational, and even though I've had some negative experiences, the silver lining is some of these people have come my way, and just to have an opportunity to work with people at this level. And, I got a fantastic agent named Lara Levy. She's just incredible, and the people she's bringing to the table are just incredible. So it's out of that dark story came some real positive relationships and business relationships, Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. No, well, you have a lot happening there. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
But it was such a pleasure to meet you. I cannot wait to read your book, and I really, really appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Likewise, Tim. It's been an absolute delight to meet and speak with you, and look forward to coming back in the future if you invite me back. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. Thanks, Randy. So that was my interview with Randy Rush. If you like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And let me know in the comments what you think of this interview, and what would you do if you won 50 million? I love checking out your comments. And if you want to see more interviews, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when more interviews come out. But thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your support.